Crypto Caesar Capital. Hope you well. It's the 1st of March 2026. And we're going to have a look at Bitcoin in a moment. But as we all know, yesterday the US started its strikes on Iran. Iran has retaliated, hitting Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Kuwait, etc. So a lot going on in the Middle East at the moment. So as you all know, I spend a lot of time in the Middle East, in Dubai in particular, and I'm not there at the moment, which is cool, but I just hope everybody who is there and all my friends and family, etc., who live there are all good. Anyway, that being said, so yesterday when this started, Bitcoin immediately reacted. It went from about 66,000 down to about 62, 63. And very, very quickly, it reversed all of that downside, which, in my view, shows absolute strength in Bitcoin. And war is pretty bad news generally for markets, particularly risk assets. And obviously, Bitcoin has been considered a risk asset at the moment. But it has done really well to hold up like it has. So I think this is showing absolute strength for Bitcoin. And I've got a gut feeling here, and we'll come on to the technicals in a minute, but I've got a gut feeling that Bitcoin is carving out a bottom here because, when Bitcoin's bearish and it's a sort of in a downtrend, which we've seen over the last 5 months, really, it just won't go up with good news, and any bad news, it goes down even more. And we had some pretty damn bad news yesterday. I would say probably the worst type of news. And Bitcoin shrugged it off. So I think that that is a really good sign of strength. And in my view, we could be carving out some form of bottom here, whether it's a local bottom or whether it's a bottom overall. But this is my view. My view has been very, very clear over the last few weeks. To me, Bitcoin at these sorts of prices is a massive value proposition. I think that this is a huge value proposition, and I think that this is a place where a person should be positioning, whether it's an entity, person, individual, retail, or institution, should certainly be taking position now. Some of you know that I sold about 25% of my position around about the 96K, 95, 96K point. But I have now fully repositioned myself down from 75 right down to 60. So I'm fully back and repositioned in the market. Some people might think I'm crazy, but I'll explain to you why in a moment I have done that. So first things first, let's take a look at this trend line. So this trend line has been a trend line that Bitcoin has respected in its previous two cycles. And as you will see here, down at the December 2018 low, that is where this trend line started to take effect. So it bottomed out here around 3K in 2018 December. Then we had the COVID sort of black swan event. It wicked down through it, but respected it in the end, closed on two weekly candles above it. So again, shows significance of this trend line. Then again, it bottomed out and completely respected it right through the bottoming process from November 2022 all the way through to January 23. And as you can see here, if we look closely, it wicked down when it hit 58, 60K back at the beginning of February, completely respecting that long-term trend line. And what's quite interesting about these candles at the moment is, the bears are really trying to push it down, but every time they try and push it down, there are buyers who protect that area and buy in, thinking, in my view, that this is a value proposition for Bitcoin. So that's quite interesting. So we've got Bitcoin sitting basically at quite a historical, not hysterical, but historical trend line. which it's respected all the way back since the 2018 bottom. In fact, it goes back to 2017 if you want to chart it out a bit further. But yeah, it's holding this trend line. So I think this is a kind of important trend line for Bitcoin. But also at the same time, we're at this trend line. The RSI on the weekly has essentially hit almost historic lows. So you can see here, this is where we are at the moment. We're sitting on about 26.73, which is super low, as low or about as low as it was back when we had the big dip down in June 22. Lower than the COVID dip and lower than the bottom in 2018. So I think that's pretty significant, really. I mean, when you've got an RSI this oversold, you know, there is suggesting that the bearish momentum is waning and the sellers are becoming exhausted. And that's a pretty low reading, 26 on a weekly RSI. That's pretty much, depending on which chart you look at. On this chart, it's Binance, but I've seen some other charts where it's actually historic weekly RSI low. Now, obviously, you know, I accept that you can't just trade an asset on the RSI, right? That would just be stupid. And I accept, you know, as I tell people, I've been telling people for many, many years now, the RSI can remain oversold or overbought longer than a trader can remain solvent. But we haven't just got an oversold RSI here. We've got an oversold RSI at historic lows. And we are basically sitting at a pretty important trend line, okay? And the ecosystem of Bitcoin now has completely changed. Okay, we're not sort of, you know, we're not in the Wild West so much anymore. I mean, we still will be slightly until the Clarity Act passes, but we have institutions involved. Back in 2021, 2022, or 2020 through to 2021, we didn't have any institutions involved. There were no institutions involved. I travel around the world, speak to people about Bitcoin all the time, attend conferences, speak at conferences, and I can categorically tell you no significant institutions were involved in Bitcoin in 2020 through 21. There might have been some hedge funds, but there certainly weren't any big institutions. We didn't have ETFs, we didn't have BlackRock, etc., etc. And we certainly, that wasn't the case back in 2017, 18, 19, etc. So what's changed at the moment is the bid. The bid has changed. The bid is now coming from Wall Street, among other places, okay? And the ETF through IBIT and all the other people that provide, or the institutions that provide an ETF for Bitcoin, has opened the doors to a significant more portion of capital inflows into Bitcoin and different types of investors as well. And along with this, we've got to consider the volatility of Bitcoin, right? Because previously, Bitcoin would have really, really, you know, significant and sort of parabolic moves to the upside. Okay, and then huge drawdowns to the downside, you know, drawdowns of 80, 90%, but, you know, sort of parabolic moves of 3,000%, etc. But now that the institutions are involved, that volatility has been muted or dampened somewhat because they don't want too much volatility. They like a bit of volatility, but not too much. And part of the reason they've come to Bitcoin is because of the volatility. But what's happened with Bitcoin volatility is it has dampened over time. And if you look at my tweet that I made yesterday on, go and check out the thread. It's the latest thread I've got on my channel on Twitter. You can go and take a look. Go and take a look at the realized volatility, 30-day annualized on Bitcoin. You could see that Bitcoin back in the day, you know, back in sort of 2017, 18 and 2021, it had a sort of a realized average volatility of around about 90 to 100, and it would spike up to the 160s, the sort of 170s, 180s. You know, and so it had a kind of an average volatility. It was a 90 to 100 vol asset, okay? But now Bitcoin is kind of sort of a 40 to 50 vol asset, you know, okay? There might be some spikes of devol on the options markets because of sudden moves either to the upside or the downside. but generally speaking, the average volatility of Bitcoin at the moment is like 40, 50 vol. So it's a 40, 50 volt asset. Now, previously, when Bitcoin was like a 90 to 100 vol asset, you would expect really significant upside and also significant downside, 80, 90% drawdowns. But now we are in a sort of trading as a 40, 50 volt asset. Bitcoin is going to have a muted upside and also a muted downside. And that's why I think that when looking at the actual drawdown of Bitcoin in this last move to the downside from 126 to 60 or 58, is about a 52% move. Let's check it out. Here you go. So this is from the peak down to its low, about 60. Yeah, it was about 60K, depending on which exchange you look at. But, so that was a 52.43% move. Okay. And as I've just been saying, Bitcoin is now a 40 to 50 vol asset. Okay. That means that the volatility over time has now been muted somewhat or almost halved. Okay. We've gone from basically being an 80, 90, 100 vol asset to a 40, 50 vol asset. It's pretty much halved. Okay. The volatility. So as I've just said, the volatility, the upside will be muted somewhat, and so will the volatility to the downside. So when you're looking at a 50 vol asset and it's drew down like 52%, that to me says that actually could be the corrective move for Bitcoin. Or if it's not the full corrective move, we are pretty damn close to this corrective move being done and finished. Okay. If this corrective move continues through March, I'm going to be pretty sure that'll be it. The bottom will be in. Okay. But my point is this: is that right now, in my view, Bitcoin is a value proposition. It's a value proposition because it's drawn down 52.43%, and it's a 40, 50 vol asset. It's a value proposition because the weekly RSI is pretty much sitting at historic lows. It's a value proposition because it's sitting right on a trend line with the RSI at this point. And it's also a massive value proposition when you look at the fear and greed index. I mean, Bitcoin is basically, apart from here, which is still technically fear because it was it's 50, right? So it just went into a sort of neutral area slightly in October, but it spent most of its time through October all the way till now in either fear or extreme fear. And right now it's at 5. And 5 is the lowest that it's ever been. Okay. So we've spent October, November, December, January, February in either fear or extreme fear. Okay. And this to me is suggesting that this is a value proposition, right? This is a value proposition. You buy things when there's blood on the street. You buy things when there is extreme fear on the streets. And to me, this just suggests to me that this is a good opportunity to buy, and that's why I've been buying. Could Bitcoin go down a little bit lower? Of course it could go down a little bit lower, but I'd rather start carving out my position now, because to me, when I'm looking at all these technicals, it's telling me this is a value proposition. Okay. Can I take another 10, 20% sort of to the downside? Maybe. Do I want to risk sitting in all of my position waiting for Bitcoin to get to like 50K or 40K or something? Well, probably not even going to go to 30K, but 30K, probably not. Okay. So I'd rather start taking position now and sit this one out, because to me, as I've said, we're sitting on this trend line. We've got the RSI sitting right down here at 26. We've got a fear and greed index of 5. And also, when looking at the monthly chart, all Bitcoin has actually done when you take out the wicks, it's actually holding the previous all-time high, right? When you take out the wick, okay, it's basically, let's do it this way. Let's turn this into a line chart, right? Bitcoin is technically still just holding this area here. So it's holding its structure on a monthly basis, okay? Which is really also, I would say, a good indicator that this could be holding structure, and the next move for Bitcoin could be a grind to the upside. Also, let's take a look at the monthly RSI. The monthly RSI is literally, let's have a look. It's like right on. Take that one away. So previous cycle went a bit low, went down to kind of 40, but it's at 43 right now. Pre-cycle before that, so this is so it dropped down. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at the chart. Let's get the chart out so we can actually see what's going on. So okay, so this was the low. So this is sort of December, January 2019. This was the previous cycle low. That hit 43. That's where we are now. And the cycle before that, okay, that was the cycle low. What did it hit? 43. That's where we are now. Okay. This all suggests to me that, you know, this is a good position or point in time to start nibbling away and taking position. As I say, I've been positioning myself. I'm fully positioned from 75 right down to 60. And I'm happy now to sit in this position and wait it out because, in my view, Bitcoin is a value proposition at the moment. So that's the video for today. Okay, if you want to wait it out for 40K, you know, 50K, is it worth it? Or do you think maybe you should start taking a little bit of a position now? My view is I think you should start taking a little bit of a position now. Personally, myself, I'm fully allocated. I'm fully in, you know, from 75 down to 60. Do you want to wait for another 10% drawdown? Do you want to wait for another 15, 20% drawdown? Is it worth you taking that risk? Because at the end of the day, Checkmatey pointed this out the other day. When Bitcoin is in such value proposition, it only spends 2% of its time in these areas. You know, so it's not going to be here for long. Okay, so my view is I'm happy with the position I've taken and I'm happy with the risk I'm taking. But when I'm looking at this trend line, when I'm looking at the drawdown of 50%, when I'm looking at the volatility, the realized volatility of Bitcoin being 40, 50 at the moment, and that drawdown being 52%, when I'm looking at the RSI, when I'm looking at the fear and greed index, when I'm looking at all of these other indicators I've been looking at over the days, which we can have a look at in another video, this to me is suggesting that this is a massive value proposition. So I am happy taking position on Bitcoin at these prices. That's the position I'm taking. I could be wrong, but I think I've got a good chance of being right. Anyway, that's the video today. If you want to join the group, links in the description. Check out the website. You can either email us directly or you can DM me on Twitter. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you for the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.